What's up everyone, Moonrider here. Don't mind the mess, this is just how my setup looks when I'm in the middle of projects and videos and stuff like that. But in this video, here's a project. I'm gonna make these cables disappear, and I'm gonna do it without managing a single one of them. So how am I gonna do it? I'm gonna create a false back wall, and I'm gonna do it in a way that allows me to easily remove it from the wall. That way I can get to any cables I need to. So it's got to be lightweight, easy to remove and reinstall, and it has to blend in. So let's do it. These are the materials that you're gonna need for this project. One sheet of corrugated plastic, some wood for the spacers, Velcro, and these L brackets. So to start things off, you're gonna wanna locate the studs behind your wall. I've marked 3 in the area that I'm gonna be mounting this. Next, you'll want to measure for the wood spacers, since the spruce pine furring strip I purchased was 8 feet long. You want to give yourself some space between the spacer and the baseboard, and you also don't want the spacer going too high up towards your setup. I'll explain more on the reasoning shortly. So for mine, I decided to cut them down to 18 inches. And don't worry, this spruce pine is soft and easy to saw through. Next, I pre-drilled some 3-inch wood screws through the furring spacers. I use such a long screw because the furring strips are 1.5 inches thick. I'd also recommend a thicker spacer to accommodate space for your cables and possibly even outlets, which I had to do. So this was from my first attempt at this project, which didn't go as planned. It cost me a lot of time, a bunch of money, but I did learn from it, and I'll share what didn't work later in the video so you don't make the same mistakes as me. But for demonstration purposes, I use this level to match the heights of the 3 furring spacers across the wall. And here are the spacers mounted. Next up, the Velcro. I recommend not using any Velcro rated for more than 5 pounds. This is because the hold is too strong and it can damage the corrugated plastic when you try to pull it away. I also recommend choosing white Velcro if you're leaving the corrugated plastic white or painting it a light color. After attaching the Velcro together, I cut off 9 small pieces. I applied Velcro to the top, middle, and bottom of the furring spacer. Now that the spacers are installed and Velcro is applied, I'm measuring for the length I want the backboard. Leave some excess backboard to hide behind your desk. And here we have our corrugated plastic sheet. It's pretty big, but thankfully easy to cut to size. Please, for the love of God, don't mind the living room. It got tossed into disarray when it was the only room with floor space big enough for this sheet. I decided to cut it 20 inches high to give some overhang from the spacers and about 60 inches across with an inch or 2 hiding behind each of my Alex drawers. You don't want the backboard too high, otherwise you won't be able to tuck or grab cables from under your desk. From the top of the backboard to the bottom of my desktop is 2.5 inches. But don't worry about the gap, no one will see it when we're finished and you'll see why. Cutting this corrugated plastic is super easy. Once I had my measurements for cutting, I used a box cutting blade to slice through the plastic. It's much easier cutting with the corrugation, but even cutting against it isn't too bad. As long as you're patient and precise, it'll turn out just fine. Also, I had a fabric cutting board beneath the sheet that I moved around as I cut to protect the carpet beneath. Now I'm cutting the height, and I'm ashamed to say I forgot to use the fabric cutting board for this round. Don't be me. If you want, you can end it there and mount the backboard, but I decided to paint mine the same color as the wall's covering. I did this for 2 reasons. The first, so it hopefully blends in better, and the second, to prevent so much dog hair from sticking to the plastic from static. While the paint dries, I moved on to the next part of my project. Using some of the remaining furring strip from my Mark I design, I screwed on the L brackets. This strip will serve as support for another piece of the corrugated plastic that will hide the desktop mounted power strips and plugs, as well as the gap between the backboard and the desktop.
From the corrugated plastic leftovers, I cut off a piece that was 60 inches wide and 3.5 inches tall. I considered a few variables while sizing this piece out. As for the height, I wanted it tall enough to cover all the bulky power adapters from monitors and RGB, but not too tall I could no longer push my chair under the desk. Also, I used 3 more pieces of Velcro to hold up the corrugated plastic, 2 on the outside edges and 1 in the middle. Finally, the backboard is getting mounted. Both pieces of Velcro are still attached to the spacers with the glue exposed for contact with the backboard. This means you need to make sure it's level before you press the board to the spacers and the Velcro. Once it's pressed, allow it to set for a while before peeling the Velcro apart and the backboard away from the spacers. If you don't plan to peel it away, feel free to start stuffing those cables behind the backboard. Now before we jump to the finished product, I want to share my Mark I woes with you so you don't make the same mistakes. For starters, my first furring strip was only 3/4 inches thick, meaning it didn't create a large enough gap for my wall outlet and plugs to hide behind the backboard. Secondly, I used black Velcro which managed to show through a bit despite the corrugated plastic not being transparent. It looked like a permanent shadow where all the pieces were located and it didn't look good. Lastly, my original attempt consisted of 2 pieces of corrugated cardboard instead of 1. These 2 pieces were each 36 inches wide and the original plan was to have them join up in the middle of the wall behind my center desk leg. The problem was, each of the backboards wanted to bow and they didn't join up in the middle as flush as I hoped. The gap was very visible even behind the desk leg. So there you have my mistakes. If you want to add this backboard to your own setup, be sure not to repeat my Mark I fail tale. Now let's see how the Mark II backboard looks in the setup.